It is now time to take a break from the busyness of life, from all the stress and worries that so often we cannot change or even influence, and listen to a story that invites us to reflect on how we have been using our sacred gifts of knowledge, which is something that is always under our control. We read from the book Jesus in the Home, chapter 14, titled The Crown and the Wings. During the meeting, they were discussing the glories of knowledge when, to illustrate, Christ humbly narrated the following story. Having been told that intellectual development could lead one to divine understanding, a truth-loving man decided to launch himself toward the top of the mountain of knowledge, using all the forces he could muster in the decisive undertaking. The pathway was overcast, like a dark labyrinth. However, overlooking every hardship and danger, the tireless fighter pressed on, changing his attire as he went along, in order to better meet the demands of the climb. From time to time, he would cast aside a tunic that had become too tight, or a sandal that seemed to have become useless. He continued making use of new pieces of clothing until one day, many years later, he reached the top of the mountain, where one of God's representatives came to see him. The emissary greeted him, embraced him, and adorned his brow with a dazzling crown of light. But when the champion of knowledge wanted to proceed on the path to heaven, the messenger recommended that he traced his steps in order to see the path he had traveled, because from this review it would be determined whether or not he should be granted the wings that would enable him to fly to meet the Heavenly Father. The aspirant started back down, but now, aided by the resplendent halo that had been given to him, he was able to make out all the nooks and crannies along the path that he had not noticed the first time. He could not contain his laughter when he saw the strange clothes that the travelers, making their own way to the top after him, were wearing. Here he saw a torn tunic, there a costly sandal. Vast numbers of pilgrims were leaning on fragile walking sticks, while others were trying to shield themselves in threadbare cloaks. Even so, with childlike impertinence, they marched along, all sure of themselves, as if they were dressed in the most valuable of clothes in the world. The winner of knowledge could not put up with the impressions the scene was causing him, and he gave way to statements of ridicule, harshly condemning the ignorance of all those who were making their way in ridiculous or inadequate clothing. He shouted, criticized, and made bruising taunts. He spoke to the group of travelers with such sarcasm that many of them gave up the climb and returned to the idleness of the vast lowlands. After having cursed everyone indiscriminately, the crowned hero returned to the peak of the mount, expecting to immediately embark on his journey to meet the Heavenly Father. But the angel very sadly explained that the other people's clothes, which had provoked him to such pointless sarcasm, were the very same ones that he himself had worn while climbing, when he was fragile and half blind, and that the wings of light with which he would ascend to the divine throne would only be given to him if he built up love in his innermost being. As it was, he lacked mercy and understanding, and now he had to return belatedly to the path and help others. Otherwise, he would never be able to find balance in heaven. A few minutes of unfathomable silence followed. The master, however, placing considerable emphasis on his words, concluded, "There are many souls on earth who flaunt the luminous crown of knowledge, but their hearts lie asleep in mercilessness, distinguishing themselves with their childish sarcasm and undue criticism. Demanding and cruel, and poisoned by misunderstanding, they demean their less knowledgeable or educated fellow beings, instead of extending a fraternal hand to them in the realization that they too were once fumbling and imperfect. But as long as they decide not to help their less enlightened and fortunate neighbors by welcoming them with their hearts, with sincerity and devotion, they cannot receive the wings with which they can rightfully fly towards heaven." There we have it, my friends, another lesson in humility and the importance that every endeavor of our lives be led by a charitable heart, just like Jesus exemplified to us. Let us always remember that blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven, and blessed are the pure of heart, for they shall see God. So be it.